When my son passed away, my daughter-in-law said, "Don't be dramatic, pack your bags and learn to survive." I wiped my tears and lived in my car for 2 weeks. That's when my son's lawyer called with some good news. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never imagined that losing my son would be the second worst thing to happen to me that week. Daniel had been gone for exactly 7 days when Marissa walked into the living room where I sat folding his old sweaters, tears falling silently onto the soft wool. The funeral flowers were still fresh in their vases, their cloying sweetness mixing with the scent of his cologne that still lingered on his clothes. "Evelyn, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. Not the gentle, sympathetic tone she'd used at the funeral when people were watching. I looked up, expecting maybe a conversation about the children or perhaps arrangements for Daniel's belongings. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against the doorframe. "Of course, honey. What is it?" Marissa stepped into the room but didn't sit down. She remained standing, towering over me as I sat curled on Daniel's favorite armchair, the one he'd insisted on keeping, even though it clashed with her modern decor. "I've been thinking about the house situation," she began, and something cold settled in my stomach. With Daniel gone, things need to change. The kids and I need space to grieve properly. And honestly, having you here is just too much right now. I blinked, trying to process her words. Too much? "You're always crying, always touching his things, always talking about him like he's still here. It's not healthy for the children to see their grandmother falling apart like this." Her voice was steady, clinical almost. "They need stability, not constant reminders of what they've lost." My hands still on the sweater I'd been folding. Daniel's favorite gray cardigan that he wore every Sunday morning while reading the paper. He'd worn it just 3 weeks ago before the cancer took its final vicious turn. "Marissa, this is my home too. Daniel and I discussed this before he got sick. He wanted me to stay here to help with the kids, to be close to family." My voice came out smaller than I intended. She let out a short laugh that held no warmth. "Daniel said a lot of things when he was medicated and not thinking clearly. The reality is that this house belongs to me now, and I need you to pack your things." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs, and for a moment, the room seemed to tilt. "Pack my things?" "Don't be dramatic, Evelyn. You're a grown woman. Make your arrangements and learn to manage on your own. Daniel always said you were stronger than you acted." She paused, studying her reflection in the hallway mirror and smoothing down her blonde hair. "Besides, you'll figure something out. You always do." I thought about the small savings account Daniel had helped me maintain. Barely enough for a security deposit on a studio apartment. Certainly not enough for first and last month rent in this expensive suburb where my grandchildren lived, where Daniel was buried, where my entire life existed. What about Lily and Noah? I watch them every day after school. I help with homework. I cook dinner. My voice trailed off as I saw her expression. "I'll figure that out. Maybe it's time they learned more independence anyway. Daniel babied them too much, and honestly, so do you." The casual cruelty in her tone made my chest ache. These were her own children she was talking about. The same children who ran to me when they scraped their knees, who asked me to read them stories, who called me their best grandma because they were their only grandma. Marissa's parents had never shown much interest in being grandparents. "How long do I have?" I managed to ask. "I'd like you gone by tomorrow evening. I have some people coming to look at redecorating Daniel's office, and I don't want any awkwardness." Tomorrow evening. 24 hours to dismantle the life I'd built here over the past 5 years. Ever since Daniel had insisted I sell my little apartment across town and move in to help with the kids when Marissa went back to work. "Where am I supposed to go, Marissa? I don't have anywhere lined up. Can I have a week? Maybe 2, just to find something?" Her expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew more impatient. "Evelyn, I really need you to stop making this harder than it has to be. Daniel's gone. The situation has changed. You're not my responsibility." Not her responsibility. After 5 years of cooking dinner she was too busy to make, of staying up with sick children while she traveled for work, of keeping this household running while she maintained her social calendar. After 5 years of being the grandmother who never missed a school play or soccer game. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice to remain steady. "I'll pack tonight." As I started to rise from the chair, Marissa's voice stopped me. "Oh, and Evelyn, I'd appreciate if you didn't make a big scene with the children. They're already dealing with enough trauma. The last thing they need is to see you having some kind of breakdown." That night, I packed my belongings in the same suitcases I'd brought when I moved in. It was shocking how little I actually owned. Most of the furniture in my room had belonged to the house, and I'd gradually given away or donated most of my possessions over the years, keeping only the essentials and a few precious mementos. I tucked Daniel's gray cardigan into my suitcase, along with a framed photo of him holding the kids on their last Christmas morning. I left behind the small television he'd bought for my room, the comfortable reading chair that had been his housewarming gift to me, and the bookshelf filled with novels we'd shared and discussed over Sunday morning coffee. The hardest part was writing the note for Lily and Noah. How do you explain to an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old that their grandmother is leaving without making their mother look like the villain? How do you say goodbye without promising to see them soon when you have no idea where you'll be living or how you'll manage it? In the end, I kept it simple. Grandma Evelyn had to move to a new place, but I love you both so much. Be good for Mommy. Love and hugs always. I left the note on their bathroom mirror where they'd see it in the morning after I was already gone. I couldn't bear to face their confused questions or see their tears. Mirza was right about one thing. They'd already lost their father. They didn't need to watch their grandmother fall apart, too. The trunk barely closed over my belongings, and the back seat held the few groceries I'd managed to grab from the kitchen. Crackers, peanut butter, bottled water, things that wouldn't spoil. I sat in the driveway for a long moment, looking up at the house where my son had lived his last years, where my grandchildren were probably still sleeping peacefully in their beds, unaware that their daily constant had just vanished from their lives. Marissa appeared at the front window, coffee mug in hand, watching me with the same expression she might wear while observing a neighbor's yard sale. Making sure I actually left, I realized. Making sure I didn't change my mind and come back to complicate her fresh start. I put the car in reverse and drove away from the only family I had left, with nowhere to go and no idea how I was going to survive what came next. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here. 2 weeks. That's how long a person can live in their car before the shame becomes almost unbearable. I'd parked behind a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, far enough from Daniel's neighborhood, but I wouldn't risk running into anyone I knew, but close enough that I could still drive by the kids' school sometimes and catch a glimpse of them at recess. Pathetic, maybe, but those moments were the only light in my increasingly dark days. The first few nights, I'd convinced myself this was temporary. I'd find a solution. Maybe a room to rent or a small apartment I could afford. I'd applied to 3 different senior living communities, but the waiting lists were months long and the deposits were far beyond my reach. The few affordable apartments I'd looked at were in neighborhoods where I was afraid to walk to my car during daylight, let alone live alone at night. My daily routine had become a careful choreography of survival and dignity. Every morning at 6 a.m., when the diner opened, I'd go inside and use their restroom to wash my face and brush my teeth. I'd order a cup of coffee and a piece of toast, the cheapest items on the menu, and sit in a corner booth for as long as I could make them last, sometimes stretching one coffee for 3 hours while I read yesterday's newspaper someone had left behind. The worst part wasn't the physical discomfort, though sleeping curled up in the driver's seat had left my entire body aching. It wasn't even the fear, though every night brought new terrors, strange noises, flashlights from security guards making their rounds, the constant worry that someone would realize I was living in my car and call the police. The worst part was the invisibility. I'd become a ghost of my former life. Yesterday, I'd seen my neighbor Margaret at the grocery store, where I was buying another loaf of bread and jar of peanut butter, my diet for the past week. She'd looked right through me as if I wasn't standing 3 feet away. We'd had coffee together dozens of times, had exchanged Christmas cookies for 5 years, and now I was invisible to her. I understood why. I looked homeless because I was homeless. My clothes, even though I tried to keep them clean in the diner's bathroom sink, were wrinkled from sleeping in them. My hair, usually neat and styled, hung limp around my face. I'd lost weight I couldn't afford to lose, and there were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. But it was more than my appearance. It was like I'd crossed some invisible line that separated the housed from the unhoused. And once you crossed it, people couldn't see you anymore. You became part of the landscape they drove past, a problem they didn't want to acknowledge. The hardest moment came when I decided to drive by Daniel's house, my former home, to see if I could catch sight of Lily and Noah playing in the backyard. What I saw instead made my stomach clench with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. There was a dumpster in the driveway, overflowing with furniture and belongings. I could see Daniel's desk, the one where he'd help the kids with homework every night, his bookshelf still loaded with the novels we discussed over coffee, the comfortable recliner where he'd fallen asleep watching movies with the children on Sunday afternoons. And standing beside the dumpster, directing two men who were carrying out more furniture, was Marissa. She was wearing workout clothes that probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries in the past month, her phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something the person on the other end was saying. I watched as they brought out the small dining table from Daniel's office, the one where he'd set up his laptop during his last months when the stairs became too difficult. The table where he'd spent hours organizing family photos, writing letters to the kids for future birthdays he knew he wouldn't see. Marissa waved dismissively as they tossed it into the dumpster with a crash that I could hear from half a block away. I drove away before she could see me, my hands shaking so hard I had to pull over in an empty parking lot and sit until the worst of the trembling stopped. How could she just throw away everything that connected the children to their father? How could she erase him so completely, so quickly? That evening, I made the mistake of checking Facebook on the library's public computer during my daily internet session. Marissa had posted a photo of herself in what looked like a completely redecorated living room. Everything was white and chrome and minimalist, nothing like the warm, comfortable family space where Daniel used to build blanket forts with the kids. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to clear out the old to make room for the new, feeling grateful for fresh starts and new beginnings." The comments were exactly what I expected. Friends praising her strength, her courage, her ability to focus on the future. Someone had even written, "Daniel would be so proud of how well you're handling everything." I closed the browser without reading more. That night, huddled in my car behind the diner, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since I'd left. Not the silent tears I'd been leaking for weeks, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere so buried I'd forgotten it existed. I cried for Daniel, for the grandchildren I might never see again, for the life I'd lost, for the woman I used to be. But mostly I cried because I was starting to believe what Marissa's actions had told me all along, that I didn't matter anymore. That without Daniel, I was just a leftover piece of a puzzle no one wanted to complete. I woke the next morning with my back stiff and my mouth dry. A knocking on my window startled me, and I bolted upright to find a man in a security uniform peering in. "Ma'am, you can't sleep here overnight. We've had complaints." I apologized quickly, fumbling with my keys and promising to leave immediately. He didn't look unkind, just tired. "You should check out the shelter on 3rd and Maple. They've got space for women your age, at least for a couple of nights." I thanked him and drove off before he could see the tears gathering again. I wasn't ready for a shelter. I still had some dignity left, though it felt like I was losing it by the hour. I parked in a different lot near a strip mall and sat there trying to figure out my next step. That's when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. "Evelyn?" a man's voice asked. "Yes?" "This is Mr. Wallace. I am Daniel's attorney." I sat up straighter. "Oh, yes, hello. I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner. There's been a delay with some paperwork, but I'd like you to come by the office today. There's something you need to see." I didn't dare hope. I didn't want to read too much into his words. I asked for the address, hung up, and changed into the cleanest clothes I had, smoothing my hair in the rearview mirror before heading to the office. It was located in a modest brick building downtown. Mr. Wallace looked older than I remembered, with a kind face framed by silver hair and a tie that looked slightly crooked. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing toward a leather chair. I sat, clutching my purse like it might float away. Before Daniel passed, he made some changes to his will. He didn't tell Marissa, which may have been intentional. My heart pounded. What sort of changes? Mr. Wallace opened a folder and slid a paper across the desk. He added a clause naming you as the beneficiary of a property he purchased several years ago. It's a small house just outside of town, but it's in your name now, mortgage-free. I stared at him, mouth open. What? Daniel bought me a house? Yes. He said he wanted you to have somewhere safe, something that couldn't be taken from you no matter what. He gave me strict instructions not to tell anyone until after the funeral. I was speechless. The paper in front of me blurred as tears filled my eyes. He thought of that? He did. And there's more. There's a modest account in your name as well, just enough to get you started. He said he knew you'd need time to get back on your feet. I could hardly breathe. Relief flooded through me, followed by a wave of guilt. Daniel had known. He'd known Marissa might cast me aside, that without him I'd be vulnerable. He had prepared for it, quietly, lovingly, even as he was dying. When can I see it? I whispered. I'll give you the keys today, Mr. Wallace said gently, and I'll arrange for a locksmith to meet you there if you'd like. That afternoon, I drove out to the address he'd given me. The house was a cozy, single-story cottage with white shutters and a blue front door. It wasn't large, but it had a small garden out front and a porch swing that creaked gently in the breeze. As I stepped inside, I felt Daniel's presence immediately. The living room was furnished with a few simple pieces, a sofa, a reading chair, a coffee table, and on the mantel above the fireplace was a photo of the kids, one I had taken myself 2 Christmases ago. I touched the frame, my fingers trembling. This was my home, my sanctuary. The first night I slept there, I cried again, but this time with gratitude. The bed was soft, the air smelled like lavender, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. I unpacked slowly over the next few days, buying groceries from the account and organizing the space to feel like mine. I found a note tucked into a drawer in the kitchen in Daniel's handwriting. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But it also means you're safe. I love you. Live, please. Don't let her take your light. I held the note to my chest for a long time. Those words became my new mantra. Live, don't let her take your light. I found work within 2 weeks at a small secondhand bookstore downtown. The owner, woman named Nancy, was in her 60s and had inherited the store from her father. She welcomed me warmly, and within days I was arranging shelves and chatting with customers about historical novels and biographies. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me a sense of purpose. Every Friday I sent a postcard to Lily and Noah. I didn't know if Marissa let them read them, but I hoped she did. I kept them simple. Stories about squirrels in the garden, how many books I'd read that week, what I cooked for dinner. I always ended with, I love you to the moon and back. One Tuesday afternoon, I saw Lily at the bookstore's window. She was holding Marissa's hand, who was walking briskly ahead, clearly not intending to stop. But Lily pulled away, ran inside, and hugged me so hard I nearly fell backwards. "Grandma!" she squealed. My heart nearly burst. I looked up and met Marissa's eyes. Cold. Furious. She stepped inside and grabbed Lily's hand. "Let's go." "Wait," I said calmly. "Just one moment, please." Marissa hesitated but didn't leave. "Lily, I'm so happy to see you. I sent you postcards. Did you get them?" She nodded quickly, tears in her eyes. "Mom keeps them in a drawer. I sneak them sometimes." "You can always write me back, sweetheart. I'll send you my address again." "Okay." Marissa tugged harder, and Lily reluctantly followed. As they left, I saw Lily look back and mouth, "I love you." That was enough for now. It meant everything. I returned to my small cottage that evening with a strange mixture of peace and determination swirling inside me. Seeing Lily had awakened something in me I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Maybe I couldn't fix everything, but I could rebuild something. My life didn't have to end when Daniel's did. I could honor him by continuing to be the woman he believed in, the woman who once raised a good man and was now being given a second chance to start again. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for walking in the garden, afternoons for the bookstore, evenings for writing letters I never sent. To Daniel, to Lily and Noah, sometimes even to myself. Nancy at the bookstore grew into a real friend, always willing to share a cup of tea and listen without judgment. She told me stories about her own struggles raising two sons after her divorce, how the shop had saved her sanity. "We're like weeds, Evelyn," she once told me, laughing softly. "You can stomp on us, cut us back, bury us, but we grow anyway, sometimes in the cracks." I held on to those words. One Friday morning, I received a call that made my breath catch. It was from Lily's school. "Miss Peterson, this is Principal Rivera. I'm calling because you're listed as an emergency contact for Lily Thompson. We've been trying to reach her mother with no success, and Lily's had a fall during recess. She's fine, but she's asking for you." I was already grabbing my keys. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. When I arrived, Lily was sitting in the nurse's office with a scraped knee and red eyes from crying. She lit up when she saw me. "Grandma!" I kneeled beside her and hugged her tight. "I'm here, sweetheart. Let's get you home." The school allowed me to take her after I signed a few forms and promised to keep trying to reach Marissa. Back at my house, I cleaned Lily's knee, gave her some juice and cookies, and let her curl up on the couch with a blanket and cartoons. "Grandma, why don't you live with us anymore?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that aren't fair, but I'll always love you and Noah, no matter where I live." "I miss you." "I miss you too, more than anything." That night, Marissa finally called me. She didn't ask how Lily was. "You had no right to take her," she snapped. "I was listed as her emergency contact," I said calmly. "The school couldn't reach you. I did what any grandparent would do." "You think this changes anything?" she hissed. "You're not coming back into their lives. Don't get any ideas." I didn't argue. I simply told her Lily was safe and ready to be picked up. When she arrived, she barely looked at me. But Lily hugged me tight before leaving and whispered, "You're still my favorite." After they left, I sat alone in my living room, Daniel's note in my hands. "Live. Don't let her take your light." I realized then I didn't have to fight Marissa. I just had to keep showing up for Lily, for Noah, for myself. Time passed, and slowly, things began to change. Lily started writing me back. The first letter came in a pink envelope decorated with stickers. Inside was a drawing of us in the garden and a short note, "Dear Grandma, I miss you. I wish you could come to my play next week. Mommy says no, but maybe you can sneak in. Love, Lily." My heart ached and swelled at the same time. I decided to take a risk. I reached out to the school and bought a ticket to the play. I sat quietly in the back row, disguised under a large hat and scarf, not wanting to cause a scene. When Lily walked on stage, our eyes met and her face lit up. She performed every line with more energy than anyone else. And when the play ended, she scanned the crowd until she saw me again. She smiled and gave the tiniest wave. It was worth every second of the risk. After that, I started getting more letters, then drawings from Noah, too. Marissa hadn't stopped them, at least not completely. One day, Noah wrote, "Mom says you're not allowed to see us because you're poor now, but I don't care. I think you're still rich in hugs." I laughed through my tears. Rich in hugs. I'd never heard anything truer. The bookstore was becoming more than a job. Customers came in asking for me by name. I'd started a little corner display of staff favorites, and people were actually buying the books I recommended. Nancy offered me more hours and even talked about letting me host a weekend reading circle for kids. I felt needed again. I felt alive. One morning, I received another call from Mr. Wallace. "Evelyn," he said, "we just received an inquiry from Marissa's lawyer. It appears she's looking into contesting Daniel's will." My stomach dropped. "Can she?" "She can try, but Daniel was very clear, and we have documentation. Don't worry, we're prepared to defend your rights." The thought of Marissa trying to take even this final gift from Daniel enraged me. I'd stayed silent long enough. That evening, I drafted a letter to Marissa. It wasn't angry, it wasn't bitter, it was honest. "Marissa, I understand grief makes people act in ways they never imagined. I understand you lost a husband, but I lost a son, and your children lost a father. I was never your enemy. I was always here to help. I will not apologize for surviving. Daniel gave me this house because he knew I would need a safe place. I will not let you take that from me. I am not your burden. I am their grandmother, and I will be in their lives. You can make it difficult, but you will not erase me. The following week, something unexpected arrived in the mail, a formal envelope bearing the school district's seal. I opened it slowly, hands trembling, unsure what it could be. Inside was a letter addressed to me, signed by Principal Rivera. "Dear Mrs. Peterson," it began, "we're pleased to inform you that Lily Thompson has nominated you for the annual Grandparent Guardian Award, given to individuals who've made a significant positive impact in a child's life despite personal hardship." My eyes blurred with tears before I could finish the rest. I hadn't even known such an award existed. Along with the letter was a crayon drawing from Lily, folded and tucked inside. It showed a little house with a garden, a smiling woman with gray hair holding hands with two children. Above it, in cricket handwriting, were the words, "My grandma is my hero." I sat down on the couch and held the paper to my chest. That little gesture erased weeks of doubt and heartache. It reminded me that even if I wasn't allowed into their home, I still lived in their hearts. That evening, I wrote Lily back with the kind of letter I would have wanted to receive as a little girl. I told her that being her grandma was my greatest honor, and no matter what rules were placed between us, my love would never change. I slipped a photo of the garden in bloom into the envelope and promised her that one day we'd plant something there together. A week later, I was invited to the award ceremony. It would be held at the school auditorium, and all the nominated guardians were encouraged to attend. I hesitated. I didn't want to cause a scene, and I had no idea how Marissa would react if she saw me there. But then I remembered Daniel's words. "Live. Don't let her take your light." I went. I wore a simple blue dress, the same one I'd worn to Daniel's memorial, and combed my hair as best I could. When I arrived, the auditorium was buzzing with students, teachers, and a few grandparents. I took a seat in the far corner of the room, trying to remain unnoticed. But when Lily's class took to the stage and she spotted me in the crowd, she beamed so brightly, it felt like the sun had come out. When her turn came to speak, she stepped up to the microphone and said, "My grandma lives in a little house with flowers. She reads books and makes the best cookies. She doesn't live with us anymore, but she still sends letters and pictures and loves me a lot. I want her to win because she never stopped loving us." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the principal dabbed his eyes with a tissue. When they announced my name as one of the award recipients, I stood slowly and walked to the stage, my legs shaking with emotion. Daniel ran into my arms and hugged me tight, and I didn't care who saw. From the back of the room, I saw Marissa standing in the shadows, arms crossed, face unreadable. She didn't applaud, she didn't smile, but she didn't stop Lily either. That was something. After the ceremony, Lily came running up to me, award certificate in hand. "Grandma, you won! Did you see?" "I saw, sweetheart, and it's the best award I've ever received." Marissa approached this then, slowly, like someone crossing a minefield. "Lily, go get your brother. We need to go." Lily hesitated, hugging me one more time before skipping off. Marissa and I were left standing there, alone in a hallway filled with kids and balloons and the smell of punch. "I didn't know she nominated you. She's proud of you." "I'm proud of her too," I replied softly. "You should know I'm not trying to come between you and the children. I just want to be a part of their lives. You don't get to dictate what's best for them. And you don't get to erase me," I said calmly. "We both love Daniel. That doesn't have to make us enemies." She looked at me for a long time, her face a war of emotions, grief, pride, resentment, confusion. "They miss you," she admitted finally. "They talk about you all the time. And I miss them. I always will." She didn't say anything else, just turned and walked away. But that sliver of honesty was more than I'd gotten in months. Maybe it was the beginning of something. Maybe not. But I had learned to cherish the maybes. Over the next month, things didn't magically resolve. But they softened. I started receiving texts from Lily, sent from what I guessed was an old phone Marissa had let her use on Wi-Fi. photos of her schoolwork, videos of Noah showing off his Lego creations, and once a selfie of both kids holding up a sign that said, "Hi, Grandma." I printed it and taped it to my refrigerator. Then came a text from Marissa herself. Just one line. "Would you like to see them this Saturday? Just for a few hours." I stared at the screen for a full minute, my heart thudding. I replied simply, "Yes, thank you." That Saturday, they came to my little cottage for the first time. I baked cookies, just like old times, and we planted marigolds in the garden. Noah ran around chasing butterflies, and Lily helped me arrange books in color order on the shelf. Marissa stayed for tea, sitting stiffly on the edge of the chair. But she was there, watching, listening. I saw her eyes soften when Lily wrapped her arms around me and said, "Best day ever!" Before she left, Marissa stood by the door and said, "Daniel would have liked this place." I nodded. He built it for me. He built this life for me. She hesitated, then added, "You were always good with them. Maybe we rushed things." I didn't respond with anger or pain. I just offered her a seat and poured her another cup of tea. Because sometimes healing doesn't come in loud apologies. Sometimes it comes in silence, shared cookies, and small beginnings. The summer that followed felt like a second chance at motherhood, though this time as the woman I'd become after heartbreak. Not younger, not stronger, but wiser and more patient. Lily and Noah visited almost every weekend. They painted rocks in the garden, read chapter books aloud with me under the maple tree, and insisted on trying every cookie recipe in my worn-out recipe book. The laughter returned to my home, echoing down the hallway like it used to when Daniel was little. I no longer measured my days by how long I cried, but by how often I smiled. One evening, as Lily helped me wash dishes and Noah lay on the floor drawing superheroes, Marissa sat quietly at the kitchen table sipping tea. "They're happy here," she said finally, her eyes fixed on Lily's small hands scrubbing a plate. "I didn't realize how much they miss this. Routine. Peace. You." I didn't interrupt. I let her speak, and that in itself was a form of healing. I thought I was protecting them by keeping things quiet, simple. But grief doesn't disappear just because we pretend we're fine. I nodded. Daniel used to say, "Grief is love with nowhere to go." Marissa gave a small broken laugh. Sounds like him. She looked up at me, eyes glossy. "I'm sorry. For everything. I was drowning, and you reminded me of what I lost. I took it out on you because you were there." The silence that followed was full of weight, but not bitterness. "I forgave you long ago," I said. "I just needed space to remember who I was." From that day, things began to shift. Not dramatically, there were still moments of discomfort, boundaries being rebuilt, but there was respect now, and slowly, trust. Marissa began to invite me to school events directly. Sometimes she'd stay, sometimes she'd drop off the kids and go, but either way, she opened the door. One afternoon in early September, I was at the bookstore dusting the shelves when Nancy handed me a small envelope. "This came for you," she said. Inside was a card from Lily, glittery and handmade. It read, "Will you come to Grandparents' Day at school? We're supposed to bring someone who makes us feel safe. Love, Lily." I held the card to my heart, tears rising. "Of course I will," I whispered. The day arrived with bright sunshine and nervous energy. I wore a pale yellow dress Daniel had always liked with a sunflower brooch pinned to the collar. The school gymnasium was filled with grandparents and guardians, music playing softly as the children performed songs and skits. When it was Lily's turn to introduce me, she stood tall at the microphone and said, "This is my grandma. She taught me that even when life is hard, you can still be kind, and that cookies can fix almost anything." The room chuckled, and I laughed along with them, feeling decades of hurt dissolve in a single joyful moment. Afterward, Lily grabbed my hand and pulled me to the classroom where she'd made a drawing of our garden, complete with marigolds and butterflies. She said, "I'm going to be a gardener when I grow up, just like you." I said, "You'll be anything you want, and I'll always be cheering for you." That weekend, Marissa invited me to dinner, for the first time since Daniel's funeral. Her house was still modern and bright, but it felt less cold than before. The kids had drawn pictures on the fridge, and their toys were scattered on the living room floor. It was lived in, like a family finally settling into the spaces grief had left behind. We ate pasta and garlic bread, and Marissa even let me bring dessert, my famous lemon bars. After dinner, we sat on the porch while the kids played. "I've been thinking about Daniel a lot lately," Marissa said. "Not just about losing him, but about the way he held things together. He saw the best in people, even me, when I was like my worst. He loved you. He chose you. And he chose you too when he gave you that house," she added quietly. "He knew you'd keep us all connected somehow." I smiled at that. It felt like Daniel was still guiding us, like the threads he left behind were slowly weaving us back together. In October, Nancy surprised me with news that made my heart leap. She said, "I'm retiring, and I want you to take over the store." I blinked. "What? Me? You love the books, the customers love you, and I want it in good hands." I was speechless, but she only grinned. "Think about it. It's yours if you want it." That night, I sat on the porch of my little cottage with a cup of tea and Daniel's letter in my lap. I read it again like I had 100 times before. "Live. Don't let her take your light." I whispered, "I'm trying, Daniel. And I think I finally am." I accepted Nancy's offer the next day. Running the bookstore gave me more than purpose, it gave me joy. I started a weekly children's story hour, a monthly book club, and even a small display featuring books about grief, healing, and second chances. Customers began leaving thank you notes. One woman wrote, "You helped me remember that endings can be beginnings, too." Life wasn't perfect, but it was full of laughter, full of color, full of the kind of love that doesn't vanish even after the people we love do. One chilly November evening, Lily stood beside me in the garden, her gloved hands gently covering tulip bulbs with soil. "Do you think Daddy can see the flowers we plant?" she asked. I looked up at the sky, the stars just starting to appear. "I think he sees everything we do, and I think he's proud of you." She smiled, leaning her head against my arm. "Then I'm proud, too." In that quiet moment, I knew the journey wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about surviving. About choosing love over bitterness. About growing even through cracks. Just like Nancy said, like a weed that refuses to die, blooming anyway. Daniel was gone. But I was still here. And somehow that had become enough. Winter settled over the town like a soft blanket, and for the first time in years, I felt warm even in the cold. Not just because of the crackling fireplace in my little cottage or the cozy socks Lily had knit me in her school's art class, but because my heart, long buried in frost, had begun to thaw. My days were filled with meaning. Mornings at the bookstore became busier as the holidays approached. Children came in with their parents to pick out gifts, and I wrapped each book with care, adding small handwritten notes to the lucky few who had been regulars. "May the story carry you someplace wonderful," I'd write. And every time I placed one of those books into a child's hands, I thought of Daniel and the countless times we'd curled up with a story on stormy nights. On weekends, Lily and Noah came over to bake cookies and decorate pine cones. We painted them gold and red and turned them into ornaments for the little tree I set up near the fireplace. Marissa dropped them off and sometimes lingered long enough to chat or share tea. There was still a kind of delicate space between us, like we were walking across a frozen lake, cautious not to crack the surface. But it held, and in time it began to feel like steady ground. One morning, just before Christmas, Marissa arrived at my doorstep unannounced. She held a small wrapped box in her gloved hands. "The kids picked this out," she said. "I helped a little." I opened it slowly and found inside a delicate silver locket. On one side was a tiny photo of Lily and Noah, grinning from ear to ear. On the other was a picture of Daniel. My breath caught. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "Thank you." "They wanted you to have something to wear close to your heart," she said. I figured it was time. I invited her in, and we sat together as the children played. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was just peaceful. After all the battles we silently fought, that peace was a gift I never expected. That Christmas Eve, the kids stayed the night. We baked gingerbread men, watched old holiday movies, and fell asleep under a pile of blankets on the couch. The next morning, I woke to the sound of giggles and the sight of two little faces peeking over the edge of my bed, holding breakfast they had tried to make themselves. Toast, slightly burnt, and orange juice in teacups. It was perfect. Later that day, as snow gently fell outside the frosted windows, I found myself standing in the garden watching the wind brush over the marigolds that had somehow managed to survive the cold. Tiny and stubborn, they still held their color. Just like me, I thought. Still here, still blooming. The start of the new year brought even more changes. Nancy officially retired, and I became the full owner of the bookstore. The townspeople supported me fiercely. One woman stopped by just to say, "It feels warmer in here now." Like someone opened the windows and let the sunshine in. I started writing again. Not just letters, but actual stories, memories, thoughts, things I'd always meant to say but never had the courage. I even submitted one to a local magazine, not expecting anything to come of it. But a month later, I got an email. They wanted to publish it. The title? Weeds in the Garden, Growing Through Grief. They asked for a photo to include. I sent one of me in the garden, wearing Daniel's old flannel, dirt under my fingernails, a marigold in my hand. The story spread more than I imagined. Women from across the state sent letters to the store. Some were widows, some were estranged mothers. Some were just tired women who said they felt seen. I wrote each of them back. That spring, Lily's school invited me to speak at Career Day. "They want to show the kids that strength doesn't always wear a cape," the teacher said. I laughed, but I accepted. When I stood in front of Lily's class, I told them about books and gardens and the power of kindness. I told them about Daniel, how he had always believed that people should grow no matter how hard things get. "We're like flowers," I said. "We may not bloom at the same time, but we're all reaching for the sun." Lily beamed. Even Marissa, sitting quietly in the back, looked moved. Afterwards, she pulled me aside. "You are amazing," she said. "Thank you for showing them that strength can look soft." I smiled. "And thank you for letting me be here." That night, I sat on my porch and watched the stars. I thought about all that had changed. I thought about Daniel, his hands in the soil, his laugh, the way he'd squeeze my shoulder when he knew I was tired. I whispered, "We're okay now. You'd be proud." And I believed it, because we were. I was no longer the woman who cried in parking lots or slept in the backseat of a car. I was no longer invisible. I was a grandmother, a business owner, a friend, and most of all, a survivor. One who had found light even in the darkest places. And when I closed my eyes that night, I dreamed not of what I had lost, but of what I had grown. Because that, I realized, was the true legacy Daniel had left me. Not money, not a house, but the unshakable belief that life, even when broken, was still worth living. On the anniversary of Daniel's passing, I woke before dawn and lit a single candle in the window. It flickered gently against the glass, casting soft shadows across the room. I stood there for a long time, hand resting on the windowsill, watching the sky lighten slowly over the horizon. The grief was still there, yes, but it had transformed. It no longer strangled me in silence. Instead, it lived beside me like an old scar, a reminder of love, not just loss. I spent the morning in the garden pulling weeds and clearing a new space near the marigolds. I planted forget-me-nots this time. Daniel loved them, said they reminded him of spring even in the hardest winters. The kids arrived just before noon, bouncing out of the car with handmade cards and wide smiles. Marissa walked up the path with a small bouquet of fresh lilies. "He'd want us all together," she said softly, placing them beside the candle in the window. We spent the day sharing stories. Noah asked what Daniel's favorite food was. Lily wanted to hear about the time he built a treehouse that fell down twice before it finally stood. We laughed more than we cried. At one point, Marissa looked up at me and said, "I never asked. Why marigolds?" I smiled and touched a bloom gently. "Because they're stubborn. They grow even in dry soil, in poor light. They don't ask for much, but they bloom anyway. That's how I've always wanted to be." She nodded, as if understanding something that had escaped her before. That evening, after the children had fallen asleep curled up in the living room, Marissa and I sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. She turned to me suddenly and asked, "Do you ever think about moving back in?" I blinked, unsure what she meant. With you? In your house? She shook her head. No, I mean us moving here, into the cottage. The kids talk about it all the time. They love it here. And honestly, so do I. There's peace here I haven't felt in a long time. I was silent for a moment, overwhelmed. You'd really want that? If you're willing. I know it wouldn't erase the past, but maybe we could build something new, together, for the kids, for Daniel. I looked around the garden, at the lights twinkling in the distance, at the quiet strength that had grown within me in these walls. Yes, I said finally. Yes, I'd like that. Over the next few weeks, we began the slow process of blending our lives again, not as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but as women carrying grief and growth in equal measure. We created new routines, shared dinners, and sometimes just sat in silence, grateful for how far we'd come. The kids thrived. Their laughter filled the house, and they began calling the cottage home without even realizing it. I continued running the bookstore, but now Lily came with me on Saturdays, helping me sort books and color bookmarks for the kids' corner. Noah took up gardening, proudly pointing out every worm he found like he'd discovered treasure. Marissa started writing again, short stories at first, then essays about motherhood and loss and forgiveness. One of her pieces was published in the same magazine that had featured mine. We joked about becoming the town's unofficial grief columnists, but deep down, we both knew the truth. Our stories were no longer just about sadness. They were about survival, about second chances, about what it means to rebuild from ruins. One evening, as I closed the bookstore for the night, I found a woman waiting by the door. She looked around my age, maybe older, her eyes tired and her coat too thin for the weather. "Are you Evelyn?" she asked. I nodded. "I read your article, the one about growing through grief. I just wanted to say thank you. It saved me." I swallowed the lump in my throat and invited her inside. We talked for an hour over tea, and as she left, she whispered, "You reminded me I'm not alone." That moment, more than any award or article or garden bloom, reminded me why I had kept going, why I hadn't let Marissa's cruelty bury me, why Daniel's voice had echoed in my heart, "Live, don't let her take your light." Because sometimes your light isn't just for you. Sometimes it's the only warmth someone else has. On Daniel's next birthday, we held a small gathering in the garden. Friends from the bookstore came, neighbors brought pie, Lily read a poem she wrote about grandfathers, and Noah planted a new tree in the yard, a small dogwood, fragile, but full of promise. As the sun set, we lit lanterns and let them float upward into the night sky. One by one, glowing softly like prayers, I stood with Marissa on one side and the children on the other, and I knew, without a doubt, Daniel would have smiled at the sight. I closed my eyes and whispered one last time, "I'm still here, Daniel. We all are." And for the first time, the words didn't carry pain, they carried peace.